Hey rhythm guitar rockers, today I'm going to give you a little bit of insight on how to write a riff. So there's lots of times where we hear music where chords just aren't being played. So typically people call them a riff. But as far as the definition of a riff goes, it's sort of elusive. Everybody seems to kind of have their own interpretation of that, including myself. So a riff to me is a rhythm part of music, and we use single notes, but not always. Sometimes the notes are played too fast to play complete chords, but sometimes we can play complete chords, and sometimes it's a combination of chords and single notes. So any combination of all of those kinds of things can constitute a riff. I think it is being something that happens during a rhythm guitar part that repeats throughout the song, but it can only happen once and still kind of be considered a riff. It's sort of elusive, but you've heard it a million times. You know exactly what they are. What I did at the very beginning of the video. So I used a combination of single notes and power chords. Now the notes were flying by pretty fast. I don't think I could play all of those single notes as chords as quickly as that. Plus, when you play single notes, it has a different sound than playing chords as well. So that's another layer of the rhythm guitar part as far as, do I want it to sound like a single note or do I want to sound like a chord? The choice is totally up to you. But anyways, getting back to what I played in the beginning, it's a combination of power chords and single notes. All that I did is that I took some notes from the A minor pentatonic scale and I created them in an order which was sort of like a rhythm guitar part. Now I chose to add the power chords in there. You don't necessarily have to do that yourself. But what I'm trying to say is lots of these kinds of riffs that you hear, they actually are just derived from a scale. And that scale is the scale or the notes of the key in which the song is in. Typically, you hear them on the thicker strings. So let's just take the minor pentatonic scale. If you were just to use the 6 notes that occur on your 3 thickest strings and start screwing around with them, come up with something simple and that's repeatable, you're going to have yourself a riff. So what I did in the beginning of the video was there's actually 4 sections to the whole entire riff. So the first part of each section is identical. The second half of the first part, I use power chords. And then I do exactly the same thing in the second part, but except this time I reverse the order of the power chords. Then in the third part, I did exactly what I did in the first part. And then at the very end, I started it exactly the same way as all the other ones, but then I just used single notes descending down to end it. You don't necessarily have to use that kind of formula or anything like that. You could do anything that you wanted to do, but that was a format that I just happened to choose just for this particular video. Now, just to keep things simple, I kept that very first riff all in the same pattern, all in the same location. But if you know anything about scale patterns, they occur all over the guitar neck in the same key and they connect together. So you don't have to stay right in the same scale pattern if you don't want to. If you know scale patterns and how they connect, you could easily move up to another part of your neck, play the correct notes that are in the key, and you can make your riff that way. They don't have to be all in the same area. I had said that, typically it comes from a scale and we pull the notes out of the scale. Well, there's another exception to the rule too. You can actually play notes that are outside of the scale if you wanted to, and typically you use them as passing notes. Not always, but you could play notes outside of the scale, and if it sounds good to you, you can make that work. You don't have to stay strictly just to the notes of the scale in which whatever key you happen to be playing in. I go back to everybody's definition of a riff is different. And I just see it as this sort of elusive thing because there's so many variations and other types of elements that you can actually bring into a riff that it's really hard to pinpoint and define. But you know it when you hear it. It's one of those things. It's hard to say what it is, but I know it when I hear it. Another term that gets used is lick. Now, in my opinion, that's exactly the same thing, but we're using that term in a lead guitar sense and not a rhythm guitar sense. To me, a lick is exactly all the same things that I said a riff was, except its application is in a lead guitar sense and not a rhythm guitar sense. Look up both of those words, riff and lick, and I'll tell you, most likely, every source that you go to, you're going to get a slightly different variation of the definition. But just to get started on writing riffs, just take some single notes from a simple scale and start screwing around, make some kind of simple repeatable pattern, and you'll be well on your way to be able to write your own riffs. Remember, always have fun with your guitar, and I'll see you in the next video. If you like that video, you're going to love this brand new e-guide that's totally free. The link is in this video's description, or you can go to rhythmguitarlessons.net/capital P, lowercase r, lowercase o.